I had a near-death experience in the company as well, and it was around 2003, 2004, where we were really successful, hired a bunch of consultants. Not their fault, entirely my fault. They were all the wrong people, and we collapsed down to just me. And by the way, people talk about, third generation and how, you turn over the family and the business is I don't see that. That whole multi-generation failure, if it's happening, it's invisible to me because we're working with second, third, I'm sure there's a fourth generation out there, and these are successful businesses. If there's something that differentiates high performers, it's the desire to learn.
One question I was actually going to ask you is how you manage to juggle all of the various things you're doing, but it sounds like a part of it, or maybe a small part of it, is you had or have partners. Is that a big key to how you're able to juggle all these different things, or is it your team? Are you applying lean to your personal life? How are you able to do it?
I love that saying that if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, bring people with you. I never enjoyed the thought. I remember when I was just me. By the way, I had a near-death experience in the company as well, and it was around 2003, 2004, where we were really successful, hired a bunch of consultants. Not their fault, entirely my fault. They were all the wrong people, and we collapsed down to just me. So it was terrible, terrible time in my personal life. Everything was awful. Depression, not sleeping, it was a absolutely terrible time.
And this was supply velocity?
This was supply velocity, yeah. So we soared, we were doing amazing, couldn't hire people fast enough. And then there was a recession. It actually didn't impact most of the economy, a lot of it, but it impacted the stuff we were working on. And we just crashed and burned. It came down to me. And I'm a really good consultant. And so I was actually, when it was just me again, like it was when I started, I was pretty successful. And I was building my clients and building a backlog. And it always seemed to me to fulfill more demand, help more companies, and bring people along with you. And I remember I hired this guy, Ray. He's been with me for 17 years now. And then it kind of went from there. So I think the idea of my partners is part of it. I would say if there's one thing that I didn't make a mistake on, it's all of these ventures had some synergy. So a food company is an operation, and I'm an operations expert. And so I was able to apply expertise to that. And of course, if you're in business, then you sell. I don't care what you do, you sell. I like to call it the Lord's profession. And so I knew how to sell, and I knew operations management, and so there were synergies there. Certainly with the job as a professor, there's tremendous synergies there. I mean, that overlap is incredible. The same stuff I'm teaching my students, I might offer to some of my clients as a corporate workshop. Or the stuff I'm offering to my clients, I can bring into the classroom to help my students grow their knowledge and careers. So it's not just the typical, we got to learn statistics, but I can actually take the real examples from the business world, in order to help people see the application. So I would say if there's one thing that I've always gone for, not naturally, it just sort of happened, is where's the synergy? And if it exists, then I've got some overlap, and I can maybe do two things instead of one.
When you teach a course or you have a corporate workshop, I'm sure you have something in mind that you want your students or the folks attending to walk away with. Typically, what's the key takeaway you're trying to give people when you're talking about operations, supply chain management?
The key takeaway is growing their knowledge. What I think about, I always like to say, if you took one thing out of any of my workshops, if you walked away with one thing, and including you, Raj, if there was just one thing you walked away from, it's victory to me. But I think even stepping back, what do people want from employees? So and again, students could be students in the university, students could be, I wouldn't call my corporate clients students, but certainly they could. And I think if there's something that differentiates high performers, it's the desire to learn. And so what do I really, really want? I want them to grow their knowledge. I want them to push out the boundaries of knowledge. I think of that as like a balloon that you're pushing out from the inside. Your brain is a balloon, and could I like expand that boundary by, just a half an inch in one direction? And so now in that little nook of your brain, you've got supply chain knowledge, or you've got lean knowledge, or you've got analytics knowledge that you didn't have before. And, some of it's going to go away over time, but not all of it. And so you've just pushed out the boundaries of your knowledge. And so I love that idea that I'm helping people just like a balloon, except I'm not blowing into it and making the whole thing bigger. I'm just taking a little piece of it and expanding that barrier. And so now you've proved you can learn. I mean, I don't know how much you hire for what you know, but I like to think about hiring for people what they could learn. And by the way, it's hard to figure that out, who can do that, but that's the real goal. By the way, I didn't actually even think about this until you asked me. So I did not have that ready as an answer.
It sounded like you've said that a million times.
Once.
It came out very naturally. So I appreciate you sharing. In terms of some of the companies that you've been to, like we talked about before, do you have any top mistakes that you see regularly? We talked about some of your big wins or some of the things that you've implemented, but are there common mistakes you see regardless of the industry or the type of company?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer a little differently than maybe what you're expecting, because where lean and supply chain principles, but really lean, because lean has got that whole sort of philosophical nature, and where lean doesn't stick is almost always, not entirely, by the way, but almost always due to management turnover. And it's one reason that privately held businesses has been our mainstay. And by the way, people talk about, third generation and how, you turn over the family and the businesses. I don't see that. That whole multi-generation failure, if it's happening, it's invisible to me because we're working with second, third, I'm sure there's a fourth generation out there, and these are successful businesses. And so that consistency, lean loves that. When the believers in lean are certain top management, and that top management moves on, then quite honestly, we don't have the reference. I'll speak about it in plain terms. References are everything to us. And there's companies that we did amazing things with, but then somebody else came in, or somebody left just for the normal reasons. Hey, this is another job somewhere else. I was the COO, and I moved on to some bigger, better job, and then some of the things that we work with them on. And it's not all just lean. It could be planning, could be sales and operations planning, or forecasting. It could be something as specific as forecasting that we were working with them. And they had a great forecast, and they were making it more accurate, driving it into their business to plan labor and inventory and capital expenditures, and then they're gone, and the people that replace them just, they don't see the value of it, or they didn't create it with me. So it's not so much the mistakes. I think once you get over a certain point with us, it's working. And this is not entirely true. I can think of cases that it didn't work, but honestly, that's probably more our fault than the company's fault. I think consistency is, discipline. If I think of my clients that are into physical fitness, chances are lean's going to work really well in their company. By the way, that's another thing I just didn't think of until just now, but a lot of my clients that have decades of lean experience, I'm pretty sure they go to the gym most mornings. So
that's an interesting point. Interesting fact to share there.
Who would think?
Yeah.
I never put that together until just now, Raj. That's the second one.
You mentioned the multi-generational family businesses. I believe CK Supply is a client of yours.
That's right.
So very successful multi-generational family business. We plan on visiting one of their warehouses in a month or two to take a look at what they've implemented with your knowledge.
Yep.
Would you say the vast majority of companies that see success applying lean and having it stick then are privately owned companies? That's kind of what I was hearing. private versus public, but is that the differentiator?
There are corporate, I call them corporate clients, that their corporate culture has embraced lean. So no, it's not that. I mean, there are definitely companies that at the cultural level, it's there. The problem is, and I heard somebody say this, in order for lean to work, you got to change the culture. But you can never change the culture. And that seems like at best a complete mystery to me. But the more I spend time in this, the more I understand that it seeps in. Like as a consultant, if somebody came to me and said, Mitch, I want you to make my company lean, I would say, I can't. And this is hard for me to say on a podcast here, but I can't. I can help you implement projects that use lean. I can show you how to use lean. The actual cultural part of it, that's got to seep in over time and take hold. And so there are companies, corporate companies, that have embraced this wholeheartedly. And in order to get ahead, you got to believe. So there is management turnover, but, and again, external, internal doesn't really matter. It's one of the checkbox things. Like, hey, we do, and it's not just lean, it could be sales and operations planning, could be supply chain thinking, the broad concept of partnerships, whatever it is, it's one of the check boxes. You got to believe in this in order for us to hire you. So it's not as absolute private versus public. I would say it's more management turnover without it being criteria that makes some of these strong business principles become a true part of the culture versus something that, hey, 10 years ago we did that.
If the culture that can successfully implement lean starts with that deep and profound respect for the people that do the work, is that where you start if you want to correct your culture, for lack of a better term, so that you can successfully implement lean? Or is that, just the end point of having the right culture in place?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. I would say, to be perfectly honest, we start with identify and eliminate non-value-added work. So honestly, we start with the idea of, when it comes down to it, you showed up here for this reason. You want things to be faster, lower cost, whatever those negatives are, lower absenteeism, less inventory. You want that, and the way to get that is through identify and eliminate non-value-added work. The deep and profound respect for the people that do the work is almost I don't know what to call it. I'm not even sure I know what this word means, but it's a qualifier. So I'll tell people, okay, you want me here for that. By the way, this is only going to work long after I'm gone if this is the kind of person you are. And if we feel you're not, and I'm, by the way, dealing with that right now where I'm pretty sure that somebody who wants us to work with them is not, that's a hard conversation that we have to have, because we don't want to, 6 months later, somebody call and say, yeah, it pretty much fell apart. So I can't make that be there. And it's not something that's a result of lean. So I guess maybe it is actually what you said. It kind of always has to be there in order for you to be a successful lean company. If you don't have that, we like to say it's impossible or really hard to be lean.
And that can be there regardless of the size of the company, right? Like you've seen massive corporations that truly have that in place, and as well as the smaller mid-sized companies.
Yep. And the opposite. There's plenty of the reverse, if I can, glass half empty kind of guy. I'm an operations management guy, Raj. So, glass half empty is got to be the way that so we see that reverse in all kinds of companies. And it's kind of, the more you do this, as I think about it, but again, 25 years, the less comfortable that becomes when I see it. Used to be I could put up with that more, okay, well, maybe. And now it's kind of like, well, that's not respectful. And I'm here, that's not part of my world. So, but when you see it on the positive side, it feels great.